Hey guys, tonight we time travel to a world where sandals slap against marble and the stars are brighter than the local gossip. It's a quiet summer evening in ancient Greece, somewhere on the edge of Attica. The air smells like warm stone, sheep, and fig trees, and the cicadas are busy holding a percussion concert that no one invited. You're trudging uphill on a dusty goat path, clutching a sack of barley cakes and wondering how anyone did science in a toga. You're headed toward a knobby little hilltop, known locally as the good place for seeing stuff. That's not its real name, but it's what the local amateur astronomer calls it. His name doesn't matter. Is wearing a short chiton, has a faint sunburn on his scalp, and mutters about cloud interference while poking at the dirt with a stylus. He's sketching stars into a wax tabletone of those low-tech, high-effort notebooks that melts if you sneeze on it. He barely notices you as you plop down beside him, the night already, wrapping the hills in a cozy indigo. Above you, the sky is perfectly clear. No streetlights, no glowing billboards, just a dome of black velvet stitched with tiny white fires. You can see Orion's belt. Or at least what this guy says is Orion's belt. Honestly, it might be just 3 bugs on the tablet, but he's very confident. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You settle in as he explains his latest theory. The moon is probably not a goddess, just a sphere catching firelight from the invisible dome that surrounds the earth. You nod sagely, mostly because you're tired, and also because his breath smells like onion stew and it's easier to just agree. He gestures skyward with his stylus. This, he says, is the clock of the gods. Not the gods. Just, all of them. This hill is his nighttime lab. His scratched grooves into the rock, aligned to rising stars and solstices. There's a big stick shoved into the dirt, which he calls a gnomon. Basically, a fancy word for the shadow stick. Right now, under the moon, it's completely useless. But during the day, big shadow. Major shadow action. You'll get to see that later. Or never. In the distance, someone yells about goats escaping. Somewhere else, a flute plays off-key. But here, on the hill, it's just you, your new stargazing buddy, and the occasional scuttling beetle. He points to a star near the horizon and says, "That one means summer's ending. Harvest's soon." That's the kind of astronomy we're working with. It's practical. The stars tell you when to plant barley, when to store the wine, when to panic because your figs aren't ripening. It's not about dark matter or space-time curvature. It's about not starving. And yet, it's beautiful. Because once you've got the basics down, figs, goats, not dying, you start to notice patterns. That star always comes up before the rains. This one appears before winter. The sky becomes a calendar. A poem. A very bright spreadsheet with no rows and only columns. You lie back on a flat rock, still warm from the sun, and feel the breeze brush your skin. Your astronomer friend scribbles, mutters, and occasionally scratches his head like he's trying to dig out a solution with his fingernail. You ask a question. How do they know what the stars are? He shrugs. Fireflies, trapped in the sphere of the heavens. Or holes poked in the night by the gods. Or they're divine beings themselves. Depends who you ask. Historians still argue whether the average Greek astronomer saw stars as physical objects or as metaphysical signposts. Some scholars believe they were trying to understand nature with proto-scientific methods. Others say no. They were mostly just trying to impress rich patrons and avoid military service. Case in point, your hilltop friend keeps glancing at the city lights of Athens below, grumbling about how city astronomers have no true dark. He claims they're sellouts, always trying to predict eclipses for nobles who want to time their feasts to look important. You mention you've heard of Thales. He grunts. Didn't even have a telescope. Which is fair, no one did. Not yet. Greek astronomers worked with their eyes, a lot of string, and occasionally a rock with holes drilled in it. Yet they still mapped the heavens, named the planets, and debated orbits by moonlight. You watch as he lights a small oil lamp with a flint. The flame flickers, casting long shadows on the stone. He uses the light to trace lines on his tablet, connecting stars into shapes. A lion. A scorpion. A woman pouring water. You squint. Still just dots. Constellations, he says. Everyone sees something different. Quirky fact of the night. The ancient Greeks inherited many of their constellations from the Babylonians, but they added their own twist, like turning a simple hunter into a man so full of bravado he once claimed he could kill every animal on Earth. Euler didn't end well. The stars wheel slowly above as you drift in and out of sleep, your mind starting to match their slow rotation. The air cools. Your barley cakes are now the local bug buffet. Your astronomer hums tunelessly. Eventually, he sighs. Maybe tomorrow he'll get it. Maybe not. You ask what he's trying to figure out. He says, why Venus goes backwards sometimes. It's annoying. You nod. Retrograde motion. Makes no sense when you don't know about heliocentrism, but that's a few centuries away. For now, he just draws more loops. A shooting star flashes overhead, and he shouts, write that down. That's significant. But then forgets why it mattered. You don't mind. You're already drifting. Up here on the hill, under the ancient sky, surrounded by sleepy goats and muttering geniuses, you realize something. Boredom is relative. This might be the quietest moment you've had all week, but for him, this night is full. You wake to the gentle sound of someone dropping a bronze object onto stone and swearing softly in ancient Greek. Your astronomer friend, still awake, somehow is hunched over a pile of mysterious instruments that resemble torture devices crossed with coat hangers. He gestures for you to sit up. Come on, he whispers. You need to learn the tools. Great. You rub your eyes, brushing off crumbs and a spider the size of a lentil, and crawl over. Before you is a small cloth bundle. He opens it dramatically, like his unveiling a sacred treasure. Inside, an armillary sphere, a gnomon, a small astrolabe, and what looks suspiciously like a spoon with holes in it. These, he says, are how we speak to the sky. You nod solemnly while trying to hide the fact that you have absolutely no idea what you're looking at. First up, the armillary sphere. It's a model of the cosmos rings within rings, all pivoting around a little metal earth at the center. It squeaks when turned. Your astronomer uses it to show you how the sun appears to move through the zodiac. He spins it dramatically, then stops and frowns. Something's off, he mutters. Might have dropped it last week. Historians still argue whether these early armillary spheres were meant for serious study or were just really expensive conversation pieces for educated men trying to look smart at symposiums. Either way, they look impressive. He sets it down and picks up the astrolabe, a flat, circular device with a rotating plate on top. Etched with stars, degrees and weird curves, it's the Greek equivalent of a pocket computer. With this, he says proudly, I can find the time, the star positions, or if I drop it just right, the location of my missing goat. You laugh. He doesn't. You give it a try. The brass is cool in your hand, smooth and surprisingly heavy. You tilt it toward the sky, peer through the rotating sight, and pretend you understand anything happening. Your astronomer guides your hand. Find Polaris. Then align the rete with the ecliptic. No, not that ecliptic. The other one. You nod again. Of course. The other ecliptic. By some miracle or sheer luck you manage to approximate the time. He beams. Very good. You are now an apprentice of the stars. Then he gives you the spoon thing. It's not actually a spoon. It's a dioptra, kind of early sighting tool. You hold it up, look through the hole, and try to measure angles between stars. It's fiddly, awkward, and possibly upside down. Still, it's how they did it, measuring celestial angles by eye, arm, and sheer stubbornness. He leans closer. Do not underestimate stubbornness. That's how we calculate the diameter of the Earth. Which brings us to the gnomon, Akka the stick. This one's not planted in the dirt like the one from earlier. It's a handheld version, complete with little notches. During the day, it casts a shadow, and from that, you can figure out the time or at least when to stop working. At night, it's mostly used to make astronomers feel nostalgic. You ask if he ever drops these things in the dark. He nods grimly. I once lost a whole quadrant in a goat's nest. The bronze tools glint softly in the moonlight, and you realize something odd. These devices, for all their elegance, are manual. There's no automation, no lenses, no glass. Just rings, dials, shadows, and clever geometry. It's astronomy for people with calluses. The fringe fact of the evening. Some Greek instruments were so finely made, scholars today can't figure out how they were calibrated without modern optics. It's one of those delightful mysteries where we nod and say they were ahead of their time, while quietly avoiding any follow-up questions. You hand the tools back carefully, half expecting them to crumble into ancient dust. He tucks them away and sighs, staring up at the night skylight. It owes him an explanation. You know, he says, these aren't just for stargazing. They're for debating, for proving, for impressing that one guy from Samos who always brags about his eclipse chart. Apparently, instrument envy was very real. He pulls out a crumpled scroll and unfurls a diagram, drawings of concentric circles, dotted lines, cryptic annotations. It's a sketch of the cosmos, as imagined through these tools. Earth at the center. Then the moon. Mercury. The Sun. Mars. Jupiter. Saturn. Then the stars, stuck on the outside like frosting on a spherical cake. Perfect symmetry, he whispers. Except it's wrong. He admits it quietly. Some things just don't line up. Venus disappears. Mars moves backward. Eclipses catch him off guard. The models are beautiful, but the sky resists. Maybe, he says, the gods move things when we're not looking. You suggest maybe the earth moves. He stares at you, long and hard. You're funny, he says flatly. For context, Aristarchus of Samos proposed the heliocentric model around this time, but nobody believed him. Probably because he didn't yell loud enough or throw enough wine jugs. The wind picks up slightly. The cloth that wrapped the tools flutters like a moth. You see him wrap everything carefully, reverently. These tools aren't just instruments. They're relics of a world-view, a belief that the universe can be measured. Even in the dark. Even with no glass. Even with a spoon that's not a spoon. You lie back again, trying to imagine using these to map the heavens. The stars above are dizzying, too many, too bright. But the thought comforts you. Somewhere in the chaos, someone made sense. With rings and rods and stubbornness. You close your eyes as he mutters one more calculation into the wind, and the stars swirl slowly overhead like an ancient carousel, waiting for someone to trace their next orbit. The next evening finds you somewhere louder. The quiet hilltop is gone, replaced by rooftop chatter, the clink of ceramic cups, and the unmistakable squawk of someone misidentifying Jupiter as probably a ghost lantern. You're in Alexandria now, standing awkwardly among a half-dozen toga-clad men arguing with the intensity of philosophers but the snack etiquette of frat boys. Welcome to a Hellenic star party. The host is a wealthy patron with a flat roof, decent olives, and a tolerance for people shouting about Saturn's inclination. The guests. Scholars, tutors, scribes, the occasional sandal-wearing aristocrat who just came for the wine. There's also you somehow roped into holding a wax tablet, a stylus, and a bowl of grapes that no one is eating but everyone is using for gestural emphasis. Your astronomer friend from before is here too, now in slightly fancier sandals. He drags you toward the edge of the roof and points skyward. There. Mars is late again. Retrograde's about to start. Mars, that naughty celestial wanderer, is the center of tonight's bickering. A bearded scholar to your left claims it's due to planetary spheres within spheres. Another insists it's divine punishment for Alexandria's terrible poetry. A third offers a poetic but completely useless metaphor about how stars are like fish swimming upstream. You attempt to speak up, what if we're the ones moving, but immediately get waved off with a cheerful this one drinks early. The debate heats up. Diagrams are drawn. Fingers are pointed. Someone accuses someone else of being too Babylonian. Apparently that's an insult. Historians still argue whether these rooftop gatherings were true collaborations or elaborate excuse parties to drink and dunk on rivals. Judging by the man attempting to calculate planetary orbits with a wine goblet, you suspect a little of both. A new scroll is unrolled, this one displaying an astrological chart. Someone groans. No, we agreed astronomy tonight. No mystical nonsense. Too late. A debate erupts over whether Mars position means war is coming or someone's cousin will get gout. A fig gets thrown. You duck. In the midst of the chaos, a woman's voice cuts through. Soft, confident. She points out a missing notation in someone's diagram. The group goes silent for a beat. Then murmurs. Then returns to arguing, louder than before. You glance over the edge of the roof. Below, Alexandria hums oil lamps glowing, carts creaking over stone, laughter drifting from courtyards. The stars are faint here compared to Attica, but still visible. The Milky Way, a pale brushstroke across the sky, glows faintly above the city's sleep. A man beside you tries to balance an astrolabe on his knee while drinking. Did you know, he slurs, that the Babylonians could predict eclipses centuries ago? He winks. We just make it look better. You smile politely while helping him not drop the astrolabe off the roof. Quirky fact of the night. Greek astronomers were often building on much older knowledge. Babylonian star tables, Egyptian calendars, even Persian mathematical models found their way into Greek minds and then Greek egos. They didn't always credit their sources. Kind of like modern YouTubers. The host brings out flatbread and honey. Suddenly, the debate shifts to whether Venus always rises before sunrise or if that's just local superstition. Someone starts sketching orbits again, this time using honey to glue grape skins onto the papyrus's planet markers. You're not sure this counts as peer-reviewed. The woman from before leans your way. Don't let them fool you, she whispers. Half of them are quoting Aristotle just to sound clever. The other half don't know their north from their elbow. You ask if she's an astronomer. She shrugs. Officially, I organize scrolls. Unofficially, I correct mistakes. She gestures at the sky. That one's Antares, she says. Scorpio's heart. They think it's a planet half the time. It's not. It just looks like it moves. You're impressed. She smiles. Don't tell them. They'll argue for 3 hours. A breeze rolls across the rooftop. Someone begins a story about how Pythagoras once refused to eat beans because he thought souls lived in them. This is, somehow, relevant to a diagram about solar eclipses. You try to follow along. It's not easy. The conversations bounce between geometry, myth, politics, and occasional complaints about hip pain. Yet despite the chaos, you notice something deeper beneath the olives, the jokes, the sandal drummer. These people care. They want to understand the sky. The night stretches on. Diagrams give way to drowsiness. Someone sings a hymn to Selene, the moon goddess. Someone else snores. The woman who knows stars better than all of them packs away the scrolls. You lie back on the tiles, your head cradled in your arm, and let the conversation drift like a soft tide. A man nearby mutters that Mars is clearly made of fire. Another corrects him. Copper. You're pretty sure someone said it's a reflection of Hades. Or maybe that was the wine talking. Historians still debate whether these rooftop groups contributed much to real science or whether the true breakthroughs happened quietly, elsewhere, in solitude. But you wonder, maybe both matter. The lonely thinkers and the loud ones with grape-stained diagrams. Eventually, the party dissolves. Someone almost falls down the ladder. You help pack up the astrolabe and retrieve a stray wax tablet from the fig bowl. And as you walk back into the quiet city streets, the stars overhead seem somehow closer. Not because you've solved anything, but because, like the astronomers, before you've looked and questioned and shared bread while arguing about Saturn. You've barely wiped the grape skin off your sandal when someone grabs your wrist and points you east. The moon, your old astronomer friend mutters. She's rising. You squint. There she is, pale, enormous, impossibly slow, as if the sky is reluctantly pushing her up. She bathes the rooftops of Alexandria in soft silver, illuminating everything from cracked tiles to stray cats stealing leftover bread. Your breath catches. It's quiet now. Reverent. Well, almost. The younger student, eyes wide and full of wine confidence, blurts out, it's clearly a divine mirror, yes, reflecting the fires of Olympus. He gestures like he's flinging a revelation into the night. Someone groans audibly. Another says, no, it's a lantern, hung from the outer crystal sphere. That's why it moves predictable, it's mounted. You cough softly. What if it's a rock? Dead silence. Then laughter. A full 5 seconds of joyous, incredulous laughter, as if you've said the most outrageous thing since suggesting Pegasus might just be a horse. Rock. A bald man wheezes. Floating where, friend? In the ether? What holds it, those Zeus shoeless? And just like that, the arguments begin. One man believes the moon is a translucent orb filled with divine vapor. Another insists it's made of fire. Cold fire, he adds, tapping his nose. You can see the chill. One scholar, deep in his cups, declares the moon to be hollow and filled with celestial bees. You don't ask. You just write that one down for later. Historians still argue whether the average Greek astronomer believed in physical celestial bodies or metaphorical constructs. Sure, thinkers like Anaxagoras suggested the moon was a stone reflecting sunlight, but he also got exiled for it. So, mixed reviews. You look at the moon again. Bright, craggy, almost close enough to touch. The idea that it's made of rock doesn't feel ridiculous, but in this crowd, it's still radical. Your astronomer friend leans toward you. Aristarchus, he whispers. He said it's lit by the sun. Even tried to calculate how far away it is. You ask if anyone believed him. He shrugs. We listened. Then went back to charting dreams. And yet, in the margins of a crumpled scroll, someone has drawn a diagram. Right-angled triangles. Lines stretching from Earth to moon to sun. Hey. Figures measuring shadows with long rods. You stare at it for a long moment. Because here's the thing. The moon changes. Every night. Waxing, waning, vanishing. It's the most obvious clock in the heavens. And the Greeks noticed. They tracked it. Predicted eclipses. Argued about it. Named it Selene. Then Artemis. Then just that thing when they were tired. But they never ignored it. Quirky fact of the night, in some Greek traditions, the moon was believed to influence not just tides but women's moods, dreams, and the outcome of olive harvests. There's even one scroll suggesting that sleeping under full moonlight can make your hair grow faster. You're not sure that's true. But the way the moonlight shines across the rooftop tonight makes everything feel plausible. The conversation drifts. Someone brings up the idea that the moon has its own atmosphere. Another counters that stars sometimes pass through the moon, proving it must be transparent. You look up again. The moon hangs heavy and bright, casting shadows of scrolls, elbows, and sleep-deprived philosophers across the rooftop tiles. Your astronomer friend sighs. I tried to measure the distance once, during an eclipse. Burned my tablet trying to sketch it. That was a rough week. You ask if has ever been wrong. He laughs. I've only been wrong. But every wrong answer gets me closer. You admire that. There's something poetic, almost sleepy in the idea of failing toward the truth. The rooftop empties slowly. Someone takes a wrong scroll. Another leaves behind a wax tablet full of what might be moon poetry or just terrible math. You linger. Because now, alone under the moon, you can see why they obsessed. It's not just the light, or the mystery, or the weird stories. It's the presence. The moon is a nightly visitor. Always different. Always watching. You lie back, moonlight pooling on your chest like water. You think of those who watched this same moon thousands of years ago, long before glass, telescopes, satellites or tic-tac, and still wondered, what is she, really? And maybe that's the most human thing of all, not knowing, but asking anyway. Night after night. Chart after chart. Grape after grape. You close your eyes to the sound of distant waves and the fading echo of someone mumbling. Maybe it's just a cheese wheel after all. The following evening, you find yourself on temple grounds, not a grand marble temple with columns and oracles, but a smaller, humbler sanctuary nestled in a grove where the grass smells like crushed thyme and the priests smell faintly of old parchment and goat oil. Your astronomer friend is already here, hunched over a low sundial embedded in the stone courtyard. Beside him, pebbles. A lot of pebbles. Smooth, sun-bleached, and suspiciously well-organized into rings, lines, and a pattern that looks like either a calendar or a very patient lizard. Tonight, he whispers reverently, we track the equinox. You nod, as one does. You glance around. There's a small stone pillar casting a long shadow, torches at regular intervals, and a nearby column etched with symbols and notches. The temple's priests are watching closely, not interfering, but definitely invested. This isn't just science. It's ritual. See, he says, the shadow tells us everything. If it lands between those two pebbles at sunrise tomorrow, it's the autumnal equinox. You ask why they're measuring it at night. He grins. Because tonight we prep. At dawn, the cosmos speaks. You decide not to ask follow-up questions. As he arranges the final row of stones, a junior scribe nearby nervously scribbles on a wax tablet while another checks the angle of the stone gnomon for the 5th time. It's serious work. One misplaced pebble, and suddenly you're sacrificing goats on the wrong day. Historians still debate whether equinox observations were primarily religious, agricultural, or academic. For the Greeks, the answer was usually yes. Everything was everything. Planting barley, consult the stars, scheduling a festival, the equinox, wondering when your taxes are due, also equinox. Unfortunately, the temple grounds quiet as darkness thickens. Somewhere nearby, an owl hoots. One of the priests mutters a blessing. Not for you, probably for the gnomon. Your astronomer pulls you aside and points to the southern wall. Back in the day, we'd build whole temples around these alignments. Light would hit the altar exactly at equinox sunrise. Divine approval, geometry addition. He's not wrong. Many temples across the Hellenic world were aligned with celestial events. Architects doubled as sky readers, building doorways that welcomed beams of sunlight like divine visitors on appointed days. Quirky fact of the night. Some Greek temples had secret sun tunnel shafts cut into walls that projected pinpoints of light on inner sanctums during solstices and equinoxes. One scholar called it spiritual sundialing. Another called it over-engineering with flair. You run your fingers along the edge of the stone gnomon. It's smooth, cool, etched with faint lines, marks of previous solstices, perhaps, or just doodles from a bored priest. You ask how accurate these measurements are. Accurate enough. He shrugs. We're not trying to launch ships, just predict rain and keep the gods happy. He pauses. Also, there's a festival. Ah yes, the real reason everyone's here. A few acolytes are already bringing out baskets of offerings, figs, wine, honey cakes in the shape of suns. One priest is loudly whispering that the moon's phase is slightly off, and therefore the entire shadow ritual might be meaningless. Another priest is silently judging him with folded arms. You sit down near the column, watching as your friend lights a small oil lamp and places it carefully beside the gnomon. Its flickering glow barely reaches the pebbles, which now look like miniature planets circling a fire. He begins to explain the math behind his shadow predictions. Something about angles, latitude, the tilt of the Earth's axis, which they don't quite understand yet, but are very confident about anyway. You follow about half of it. Eventually, the conversation veers into celestial harmony. The sky's a song, he says, and we're trying to find the beat. It's poetic. And just a bit exhausting. The night deepens. Most of the priests retreat indoors, muttering about early mornings. A donkey brays in the distance. You lie back on a mat someone left behind and stare at the stars. They're exceptionally bright tonight, glittering pins on a deep velvet curtain. One last pebble is placed. A hush falls. The astronomer stares at the gnomon like it might whisper secrets if he watches long enough. You close your eyes, listening to the crickets, the gentle crackle of the oil lamp, the occasional whisper of wind through olive trees. And somehow, you begin to understand. It's not about the pebbles or the pillar. It's about waiting. Watching the sky long enough that you begin to see its patterns, to feel them. You think of that earlier astronomer, sketching stars on a hilltop. Then the rooftop debates, the moonlight arguments. Now, the sacred shadows and carefully placed stones. They're all trying to do the same thing, understand. Historians still argue whether the Greeks believed they were studying nature or interpreting divine will. But from where you're lying half asleep, wrapped in starlight and dusty linen, it feels like they were doing both. The oil lamp flickers. Your astronomer murmurs to himself. You drift, lulled by geometry and the slow rhythm of cosmic time. Tomorrow, the sun will rise. The shadow will land somewhere. And whether it hits the exact pebble or not, they'll feast, chant, and declare it a triumph of logic and faith. You smile as you fall asleep to the whisper of fig leaves and the stubborn precision of men who measure the sky with rocks. You wake before sunrise to the sound of sandals slapping against stone and someone grumbling about a missing pebble. The temple courtyard is already bustling. Torches have been replaced with sleepy-eyed priests, all pretending they weren't just snoring behind the olive barrels moments earlier. You roll over and see your astronomer friend crouched next to the gnomon, arms crossed, staring at the horizon like it personally owes him an apology. Then, the moment arrives. The sun breaks over the low eastern hills, flooding the courtyard in gold. A crisp shadow stretches from the pillar narrow, long, pointed and slowly crawls across the stone floor past the first pebble, past the second, and finally, just barely brushing the third. Everyone gasps. A few clap. One priest squints and mutters, "It's 2 fingers off." His immediately ignored. Your astronomer raises his arms. Equinox achieved, he declares. The heavens are symmetrical. Let's eat. And just like that, the measurement becomes a festival. You nibble honey cake shaped like tiny suns while a young apprentice tries to explain how this balance between day and night symbolizes harmony in the soul. He's also wearing one sandal. You don't ask. But the focus of the feast quickly shifts. After a few cups of diluted wine, a new topic takes over the gathering: astrology. It begins innocently enough. A priest complains that his olive trees yielded poorly this year. Someone mentions he was born under the sign of Leo. Another nods solemnly and says Mars was in Taurus. Very bad for fruit-bearing. Your astronomer friend rolls his eyes so hard you worry he might lose them. This again, he sighs, grabbing another cake. You ask him why he hates astrology so much. Because it gets all the attention. He mutters. I measure shadows and calculate star paths for months. Then a man with a beard declares Mercury is angry and gets a crowd. Historians still argue whether Greek astrology and astronomy were ever truly separate. By this point in history, they're starting to blend. Star patterns inform both harvests and horoscopes. Planetary alignments predict both eclipses and personality flaws. The line is blurry, and so is the wine. Someone pulls out a birth chart scratched onto parchment. It's surprisingly complex symbols for the planets, the zodiac signs, lines and circles that look suspiciously like battle strategies. The priest squints. Born in the second decan of Virgo. Tricky. Probably prone to pessimism. Avoid goats this month. You raise an eyebrow. Goats? He nods, completely serious. Especially the black ones. Very disruptive energy. You find yourself wondering how much of this is based on actual patterns and how much is just ancient people trying to make the sky personal. Because astronomy is math, but astrology is meaning. And humans, being humans, crave meaning like bees crave crushed grapes. Quirky fact of the night, some ancient Greek astrological guides included advice as specific as do not start lawsuits while the moon is in Gemini, and only fish for tuna during a waxing moon in Pisces, unless Venus is angry. You wonder how many people actually followed that and how many lawyers blamed their star signs after losing a case. Your astronomer, meanwhile, is trying not to implode. This is not what the stars are for. He grumbles. They are celestial clocks, not mood rings. You point out that clocks don't usually tell you whether your crush is lying to you. He gives you a long look. Don't help them. Still, curiosity wins. You hand over your birth date. The priest grins, draws a quick chart and announces you're a Sagittarius with a Pisces moon, which apparently makes you impulsive, philosophical, but emotionally slippery. You decide to take that as a compliment. Saturn's retrograde right now, someone adds. So don't travel far. Or sign treaties. You're not planning on doing either, but you nod solemnly. The conversation spins out from there. Someone brings up lunar nodes. Another tries to calculate the next full moon. One priest insists he can smell retrograde energy, and no one challenges him. Your astronomer stands silently with his arms crossed, quietly counting to 30 under his breath. You ask him, "You ever tried astrology?" He sighs. Once. Predicted it'd fall in love. I got stung by a jellyfish instead. You don't press. Historians still debate how much Greek astronomers actually believed in astrology versus how much they just tolerated it for patron money and public approval. After all, predicting a harvest or a good marriage was far more profitable than calculating the moon's parallax. As the sun climbs higher, the courtyard begins to empty. The shadows shorten. The leftover cakes are stale. A few young acolytes remain, arguing whether their headaches mean Mercury is in Scorpio or just that they drank too much wine. Your astronomer walks beside you as you leave. He's quiet for a while. Then he says, "I get it, you know. The sky's big. It helps to think it cares about you." You glance up. It's true. Even in the daylight, the heavens loom vast, structured, mysterious. Whether you see a cosmic machine or a divine message board, it's the same stars. Same patterns. Just different meanings. You decide not to tell him. but your chart did say today would bring an unexpected insight. Night falls again, and this time you're far from the coast, trekking up a jagged path toward the hazy silhouette of a sacred site. The wind is dry, the path steep, and your legs regret agreeing to the short pilgrimage. Your astronomer friend, however, is oddly chipper, clutching a scroll and muttering something about divine funding. You're going to Delphi. Not for prophecy. Not exactly. Is not here to ask about love or war or crops. Is here to convince a priestess that Saturn isn't cursing his career, and maybe just may best secure a patron to sponsor his next moon-tracking expedition. He turns to you with an excited grin. It's not lying, he insists. It's strategic belief alignment. You're too winded to argue. Either time. You reach the temple, the stars have claimed the sky again, and torchlight flickers across marble steps and statues with chipped noses. A few sleepy-looking attendants greet you, and after a bit of scroll-waving and polite bribery you pretend not to see the pouch of dried figs changing hands. You're ushered into the sanctuary's outer chamber. This is where hopefuls wait. Some pray. Some weep. One man is muttering about golden cows. Your astronomer is pacing. Shall ask about Saturn, he whispers. I just need to sound mystical. But not too mystical. Is my robe okay? You assure him he looks suitably cosmic. Soon, an attendant appears. The Pythia will see you now. You stay behind. Outsiders don't enter the inner sanctum. You sit on a cracked bench beside a vase that's probably cursed and listen to the distant murmur of incense-thick rituals. And wait. Historians still argue whether the Oracle of Delphi genuinely offered spiritual guidance or simply echoed well-researched guesses, cloaked in poetic vagueness. Some believe the priestesses inhaled fumes from natural gas vents beneath the temple, entering a trance that produced cryptic utterances. Others say it was all theatre, coordinated by priests with excellent eavesdropping networks. You lean back and let your thoughts wander. Delphi isn't just about prophecy, it's about legitimacy. If the oracle says your theory has merit, it gains status. Suddenly, your obscure lunar manuscript becomes a sacred insight instead of firewood. Eventually, your astronomer returns. His eyes are wide. His scroll is gone. His hair is slightly more vertical than before. She said Saturn spins slowly because it dreams of time, he mumbles. You blink. And that my chart was clouded with wisdom fog. I think that's good. You ask if he got what he needed. Not exactly, but she said my next journey would be beneath the lion's eye, which I think means Leo, or Crete, or my neighbour's cat. You let him ramble. Quirky fact of the night. Several Greek astronomers sought oracle approval for their celestial theories, couching star patterns in metaphor to gain favour. It was easier to win public support if your work came from the gods, rather than from obsessive shadow measurements. As you make camp on the slope below the temple, your astronomer sits beside the fire, scribbling feverishly in a new wax tablet. I told her about the moon cycles, the equinoxes, the retrogrades. She just said, watch the sheep. I think she meant Aries. Or maybe literal sheep. You nod. Both. Probably. He pauses. You ever wonder if we're all just interpreting metaphors wrong? You shrug. Isn't that what astronomy is? He laughs, tiredly. You know, maybe the sky doesn't care. Maybe it's just there. Big and complicated and kind of rude. The stars glitter overhead, silent and unbothered. You lie back on a rock and listen to the wind as it whistles through olive trees. Somewhere above, a priestess whispers her next cryptic vision. Somewhere below, shepherds watch for signs of weather. You ask him if he thinks the oracle was right. Is quiet for a long moment. Then, maybe Saturn really is dreaming. And for once, you let the mystery linger. It's your fourth night sleeping under the stars, and you've developed a new appreciation for stiff necks, cold olives, and the uncanny ability of philosophers to argue in whispers through sleep. But tonight, you're not stargazing for beauty. Tonight, you're sitting cross-legged on a flattened hilltop while your astronomer friend glares at another astronomer across a pile of geometry tools and a plate of cheese. Welcome to the great measurement feud, the subject of tonight's academic brawl. The size of the Earth. One scholar, let's call him the Sandal Stomper, insists it's 252,000 stadia in circumference, based on the angle of shadows measured between two Egyptian cities. He's referencing Eratosthenes, of course, who famously calculated Earth's girth using nothing but sticks, shadows, and a walking friend with too much free time. Your astronomer, meanwhile, scoffs. Yes, but he assumed the Earth was round. What if it's a dome? Or an egg? Or a sphere pressed slightly by Zeus' thumb? You blink. An egg. Historians still argue whether the average ancient Greek truly accepted a spherical Earth or just went along with the theory to keep the mathematicians happy. While Eratosthenes' math was impressive, not everyone trusted his travel logs or his sandals. The sandal stomper snaps his fingers. Shadow angle insane 7.2 degrees. That's 1/50th of a circle. Multiply the distance, you get the whole Earth. Your friend shakes his head. Unless his friend walked in circles, or unless Syene isn't exactly south of Alexandria. You know how roads are. Straight. Sandal stomper shouts. Curvy. Your friend counters. Very curvy. Lots of goats. You helpfully offer a fig. They ignore you. The conversation spirals into increasingly complicated diagrams. Someone pulls out a thread and starts measuring shadow angles with a pebble and a nervous apprentice. Someone else accuses the others of abusing geometry. Another man nearby is napping through it all, hudding a quadrant like a pillow. Quirky fact of the night, Eratosthenes' estimate of Earth's size was remarkably close to modern values if you convert stadia just right. But the unit of a stadion varied by region, leading to confusion for centuries. Did he get lucky? Did he fudge it? Did his walking friend exaggerate? You watch them debate long into the evening. Your astronomer draws concentric circles in the dirt, then promptly erases them with his elbow. Sandal Stomper insists his camel-riding cousin verified the distances personally. Someone shouts, "How do you verify shadows?" You lean back and look at the stars, wondering what they think of this. Probably, look at these tiny creatures measuring shadows on one spinning rock and calling it truth. The fire crackles. Someone throws a pine cone at someone else's math. Eventually, your astronomer sits beside you, exhausted but not defeated. He stares at the sky. You know, maybe the exact size doesn't matter. Maybe it's enough just to know it has a size. You ask him if he thinks Earth really is a sphere. He chews his lip. Maybe. But what if it's more poetic than that, like a sleeping god curled into himself? Roundish. You laugh. He doesn't. You change the subject. How far do you think it is to the moon? Further than it looks, he mutters. But closer than the truth. You both sit in silence for a while. Then he mutters, Eratosthenes had nice handwriting, though. I'll give him that. Historians still argue whether these feuds pushed science forward or just created better insults. What's certain is that Greek scholars often disagreed, loudly and passionately. But through the friction came ideas, and through ideas came something that kind of resembled progress. Someone stumbles over with a new diagram, drawn on a wine-stained napkin, and demands your astronomer refute this parabola. You quietly crawl away. From a distance, you watch the shadows flicker across the hilltop as the fire dims and the stars spin. This is how knowledge grew, slowly, stubbornly, with too many scrolls and never enough snacks. And as you drift off beside a warm rock and a cold cheese wedge, you dream of camels, curved roads, and a planet quietly spinning while humans try to measure it using sticks, shadows, and sheer willpower. You're standing in the dark, holding a sundial. Yes, a sundial. In the middle of the night. Your astronomer friend looks far too proud of this setup. It's not for telling time now, he says smugly, it's for calibrating. Tomorrow, with moonlight, maybe. You stare at the bronze disc in your hands. It's surprisingly heavy and cold, with delicate etchings of our lines and a stubby little gnomon in the middle. It is, by every possible definition, entirely useless at this moment. You're telling me we're here to align a sundial by starlight? He nods. Accuracy begins with ambition. You wonder whether sleep begins with less ambition. Still, you follow him across the flat field toward a short pillar. It's a half-buried marble column pockmarked, cracked, and covered in what may or may not be ancient goat-related graffiti. This, apparently, is the alignment point. You squat beside it and carefully set the sundial on top while he fiddles with an armillary sphere, a wax tablet, and what looks suspiciously like a string tied to a pinecone. The goal. Align the sundial to true north using Polaris, and then double-check the angles with the morning sun. This whole process, you suspect, may be less about measuring time, and more about inventing it. Historians still argue whether nocturnal instruments like this were taken seriously or mostly used for demonstration purposes, intellectual theatre to impress students and patrons, because once the sun sets, most Greek timekeeping falls apart faster than a cheap lyre. But not for your friend. Is committed. With his tongue sticking slightly out the corner of his mouth, he tilts the gnomon just so, angles the dial, and makes a small, satisfied grunt. You glance up. The sky is wide and silent. Alaris twinkles high above Patient, still, almost smug. Then your astronomer sighs. Okay, now hold it there until morning. You laugh. He doesn't. While he fusses over degrees and shadow lengths, another scholar older, grumpier, wearing a chiton that smells like wet wool wanders over. You're still doing this sundial nonsense? He snorts. Everyone's using water clocks now. Reliable, even in the dark. Your astronomer rolls his eyes. Water clocks leak. Also, they freeze. They're quantifiable. The old man barks. You don't have to guess shadows. And suddenly, it's another debate. Sundials versus clepsydra Greek water clocks. The old man insists his timekeeping method is superior. I get measurements too. The quarter hour. He declares. Your astronomer counters. I get soulful precision. Which admittedly sounds less helpful when catching a ferry. Quirky fact of the night. Greek water clocks weren't just for timekeeping, they were used in courtrooms to limit speaking time. Litigants had to present their case before the water ran out. No pressure. Your astronomer scoffs. All that tells you is how long someone talks lot when to plant barley. The grump waves his hand and wanders off muttering, Sundial poets, you stay behind, still crouched by the dial. The moon has risen, now waxing gibbous, casting just enough light to see faint shadows dancing on the stone. Your astronomer smiles. See? Not entirely useless. The moon's soft glow moves slowly across the dial. Not sharply like sunlight, more like a faint suggestion of time. Whispered rather than shouted. You ask, do you think anyone ever actually used these at night? He shrugs. Probably not. But trying to measure the night teaches you why we measure the day. You find that oddly profound for a man who just slipped on a beetle. Historians still debate how accurate ancient Greek sundials were across regions. Since they had to be tuned for specific latitudes, many were portable, adjustable, and frequently wrong. But they worked well enough for the rhythm of ancient life. Eventually, your astronomer folds up his tablet and declares the calibration a success. You squint at the dial. How can you tell? He pauses. Well, I feel it's correct. Solid science. The stars spin slowly overhead, the moon brightening and dimming with passing clouds. In the silence, you hear a distant nightjar trill, a shepherd's dog bark, and the quiet patience of instruments waiting for morning. As you finally lie back, using a scroll as a pillow surprisingly scratchy, you think about all the ways people have tried to capture time, dripping water, shadows on stone, wax melting, sand falling, stars shifting. And maybe, just maybe, it's less about knowing the hour, and more about being reminded that time moves. That we move. You fall asleep with your hand on the cool edge of the sundial, your breath rising in sync with the sky, silent turning, while somewhere, a grumpy man curses water clocks and dreams of better buckets. You wake to the rhythmic creaking of wood, and the sharp tang of salt in your nose. The sundial is gone. So is your astronomer friend. You're on a boat. It takes a moment to remember his. You agree to accompany him on this brief nautical experiment. Yes, you got distracted by star charts and fig pastries. And yes, somehow, you are now on a creaky merchant ship headed towards Cyprus, surrounded by crates of amphorae, 6 snoring sailors, and a surprisingly alert goat. The sky above is cloudless, stretched wide and pale in the early morning. The boat rocks gently as oars slap the sea, and gulls cry overhead like they have strong opinions on planetary alignment. Perfect weather, your astronomer says, appearing beside you with a scroll in one hand and a length of string in the other. Time to test stellar navigation. You mutter something about breakfast. No time, he says brightly. We're locating ourselves by the stars. You point out that the stars aren't visible right now. He shrugs. We're starting early. This particular experiment is ambitious. He's attempting to map the ship's progress using nothing but the stars, the wind direction, and a method he describes as roughly triangulated sailor vibes. Historians still argue whether Greek sailors truly used star maps in the same way astronomers intended, or if navigation was more instinct, coastline familiarity, and divine guesswork. Based on what you're witnessing, the answer is probably yes to all three. The helmsman, a broad-shouldered man with sunburned cheeks and a tattoo of a dolphin stabbing a spear, or maybe vice versa, points toward the horizon. There's Cassiopeia. Means we're northish. Your astronomer immediately. pulls out a wax tablet. But, the helmsman adds, if it's wobbly, we're drifting. Drifting how? He shrugs. Wobbly drifting. You sigh. Quirky fact of the day, Greek sailors often used constellations like Ursa Minor with Polaris, Orion, and the Pleiades as nighttime guides. But these were more memory anchors than precise tools. One star meant go home, another meant don't sail drunk. Celestial GS, it was not. Still, there's beauty in the method. Your astronomer begins marking the ship's heading. He stretches string between two wooden posts on deck to simulate angles. He tries to use the goat as a counterweight for a pendulum. It's not successful. We need stability, he mutters. Let's measure from the prow. You crawl to the front of the ship where the prow juts over the waves like a soggy dagger. He plants a little stand and sets a crude sighting tool on top, a bronze plate with a slit and a dangling thread. He mutters as he aligns it with the horizon. Now, we wait for Sirius. You glance up. The sun is high. That's going to be a while. Yes, he nods, but we can extrapolate. Based on confidence. The day drifts. The wind hums through the rigging. The helmsman tells you about a sailor who once got lost by following Venus and ended up in Crete 2 weeks late. They called him Aphrodite's fool. Another sailor, older, missing 2 teeth and possibly also some marbles, swears he once saw stars dancing on the water and followed them to treasure. Your astronomer tries to document this, but quickly gives up. You ask if Greek sailors ever really trusted astronomers. He pauses. They trusted experience, which is fair. Indeed, much of ancient navigation relied on periploi narrative coastal guides passed down orally or written like strange poetry. Sail east until you see the rock shaped like a goat. Then turn when you smell cedar. Precision. But at night when the coastline vanished, the stars were all they had. Eventually, darkness returns. Your astronomer leaps into action, eyes scanning the heavens like a hungry owl. There. He points. Canis Major, Sirius is visible. You both crouch near the sighting tool, breath fogging slightly in the cooling air. The goat sleeps beside the amphorae, mercifully quiet. Using the slit, the angle, and a few frantic calculations in the margins of an old grocery scroll, he declares your position to be roughly 2 degrees off Cyprus and very aligned with divine favor. You raise an eyebrow. Is that a measurement? He nods. A sacred one. Historians still debate whether celestial navigation in ancient Greece was reliable or mostly symbolic. But for sailors who saw omens in wave patterns and portents in bird cries, the stars offered a kind of silent reassurance. Always there. Always moving. Always familiar. A shooting star blinks overhead. Someone mutters a blessing. Someone else spits into the sea to ward off Poseidon's jealousy. Your astronomer sketches furiously. Note the angle. No. The arc. We are floating among equations. You lie back against a coil of rope and let the sea rock you gently. The stars ripple across the sky. The constellations drift past, silent companions on a sea without borders, and as you begin to doze, you realize, even if the stars don't guide the ship, they guide the people. Through fear, through hope, through night. Because sometimes, that's all you need, something above, something steady, and someone with a goat and a dream trying to follow it. You finally reached dry land again, though after days of rocking on the waves, the ground feels suspiciously like it's still swaying. Your astronomer friend claims this is normal terrestrial misalignment. You think it might just be mild seasickness. But tonight isn't about sailing or sundials or sea goats. Tonight is about something stranger. You've been invited, summoned into what your astronomer vaguely calls a mathematical reflection gathering. Which sounds harmless, until you arrive at a secluded olive grove and find 7 people in dark robes chanting softly around a circle of stones. One of them waves at you. We're just getting started. This is, apparently, a Pythagorean circle. Not the kind you draw with compasses, though they definitely do that too, but a gathering of people who believe the universe is built on numbers. Sacred numbers. Harmonious numbers. Numbers that sing. You sit awkwardly beside your astronomer, who whispers, just smile and nod. They're a little devout. A man with perfect curls and disturbingly serene eyes stands at the center of the circle and begins a slow, rhythmic explanation of how the cosmos is divine geometry. He draws invisible triangles in the air as he speaks. You're not sure if this is science ritual or interpretive dance. The universe, he says, is music. The planets strike chords as they spin. You hear it not with your ears but your soul. You blink. Someone behind you starts humming what may or may not be planetary vibrations. Historians still argue whether Pythagoras himself claimed to hear the music of the spheres or whether his later followers added that flourish. Either way, Pythagoreans believed the cosmos was a perfect, mathematical structure where ratios governed not only music, but the movements of the stars. Tonight, you're seeing that belief performed. Your astronomer leans in. It's not entirely wrong. They connected harmonics with planetary motion. It's just a bit mystical. The group begins drawing lines in the dirt, circles within circles, intersecting triangles and ratios scrawled between them like divine equations. One woman holds up a bronze mirror and reflects moonlight onto the diagram. Another recites the first 10 numbers in what you can only assume is sacred order. You whisper, "Do they actually track stars?" Your friend shrugs. Sort of. Mostly they admire the idea of stars. Someone brings out a lyre and plucks 3 soft notes. This, the curly-haired leader says, is the orbit of Mars. You nod politely, as one does when Mars has entered the chat via harp. Quirky fact of the night. Pythagoreans weren't just geometry nerds, they were full-on spiritual lifestyle advocates. They avoided Bean's long story, followed strict moral codes, and believed that understanding mathematics could purify the soul. Think math class, but with chanting and potential reincarnation. A young man sits beside you and whispers excitedly about how the number 10 represents cosmic completeness. It's called the tetractys, he says. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. The perfect sum. You resist the urge to ask what happens when you get to 11. The group now begins chanting in a low, rhythmic tone. A sort of cosmic lullaby. You hear words like harmony, order, and vibration. Your astronomer awkwardly hums along. You just sit, very still, hoping this isn't a recruitment ritual. Then suddenly silence. The leader points skyward. There, he says, the harmony of Venus and Jupiter. You look. The 2 planets are indeed close in the sky tonight, almost touching a rare conjunction. Your astronomer takes out his stylus. Actually, that's called a syzygy, near alignment of celestial bodies. The leader beams. Yes, but also, they are singing to each other. Your astronomer hesitates. Sure, that too. You lie back on the cool grass, the sky wide above you, and for a brief, strange moment, you do feel it hum of something bigger. Whether it's the actual vibration of the cosmos or just your brain melting from the day's geometry is unclear. But it's peaceful. The stars don't flicker. They pulse. They arrange themselves in patterns you almost recognize. Not constellations, not maps, but ratios. Spacing. Rhythm. And maybe that's the point. You ask your astronomer, "Do you think the universe is math?" He thinks for a long moment. Maybe it's math, he says. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's just really committed choreography. Historians still debate how much of Pythagorean philosophy was science and how much was sacred metaphor. But for this circle, on this night, it doesn't matter. The math feels true. Eventually, the group disperses, each member taking a smooth stone from the center and placing it in a small cloth pouch like a souvenir from the edge of enlightenment. You walk back under the trees, hearing nothing but the rustle of leaves and the soft whisper of wind through olive branches. And maybe, just maybe, you start humming too. You're halfway through a crumbly barley biscuit when the sky decides to throw a tantrum. It starts with a shimmer just a flicker above the eastern horizon. Then, a streak. Then, suddenly, a bright, fuzzy visitor blazing across the starscape like a flaming fig thrown by a very angry god. A comet. The sailors nearby shout, ducks scatter, someone spills a basket of pomegranates, and your astronomer friend drops his wax tablet in the dirt. You all just stare. It's beautiful. And, apparently, deeply upsetting. That, a man behind you mutters, is definitely an omen. Bad crops, says another. Worse were, someone adds, tugging at their beard as if yanking prophecy from the roots. And then, from behind a stack of amphorae, emerges an old stargazer. Cloaked in tattered wool, teeth like chipped marble, and an expression that suggests he's been waiting years to be proven right. I told you. He cackles. The heavens are displeased. He begins to list every recent misfortune: spoiled wine, a flooded bathhouse. One man's suspicious limp and ties each one directly to the approach of the tailed wanderer. Your astronomer friend is doing his best to ignore him. Technically, he mutters to you, comets and natural phenomena. Dust, gas, elliptical orbits. Perfectly rational. You glance up again. The comet doesn't feel rational. It feels like a flaming whisper from somewhere far too old to speak plainly. Quirky fact of the night: the ancient Greeks didn't have a consensus on what comets were. Some believed they were stars that had broken loose. Others saw them as atmospheric disturbances. Aristotle himself thought they were fiery exhalations from the Earth, burning briefly in the upper air, basically cosmic burps. Historians still argue whether early Greek philosophers saw comets as part of the heavens or anomalies in the sky's otherwise perfect order. Because to them, the stars were supposed to be eternal and unchanging. So when one suddenly moves and glows and trails and possibly hisses, it messes everything up. Your astronomer is visibly frustrated. This ruins the model, he grumbles, redrawing planetary paths in the dirt. Comets don't fit. You offer him the rest of your biscuit. He declines. The old stargazer has now assembled a small crowd. He is jabbing a crooked stick at the sky, declaring that the gods are scraping the heavens clean. One woman faints. Another scribbles notes for her cousin, who runs a scroll-copying business. You asked your astronomer, is he always like this? Yes, he says. And no one stops him because last time he predicted a rainstorm and it did rain. Eventually, 3 weeks later, but it did rain. By now, others have begun sketching the Compton scrolls on tablets, even on one guy's leg. It's hard to tell how long it'll be visible, or if it'll ever come back. Your astronomer insists he's seen one before, years ago, but his notes were eaten by a goat with strong opinions. The comet continues to blaze. It shifts gently westward. A few people gasp when it flares slightly, its tail a glowing ribbon against the black velvet sky. You lie back on a woven mat and try to absorb it all. There's something unspoken in the air: unease, reverence, confusion. Even the crickets seem quieter. You whisper, "Do you think it means something?" Your astronomer hesitates. "No," he says, then adds, "but it feels like it should." And that's the problem, isn't it? The Greeks wanted a universe that made sense. Circles, great shoes, predictable orbits, harmony. But then a comet shows up, unruly and bright, laughing at the system. It doesn't move with the stars. It cuts across them. Dances, deviates, defies. It reminds you that even the most careful charts can be undone by one surprise streak of light. The old stargazer is now predicting a goat rebellion. You decide not to engage. Your astronomer stares into the dark. "He'll chart it," he says softly. "Try to find a pattern. Maybe it returns. You'll later learn that he was right. Sort of. Some comets do return. Some vanish forever. Some leave behind showers. Others leave behind myths. The fire crackles low. People begin to drift back into their homes and tents and blankets. The comet still glows, but less fiercely, now like it's already retreating. Your astronomer remains seated, stylus in hand, watching, sketching, whispering numbers under his breath. And in the flickering shadow of a sky that just broke its own rules, you drift off. Not afraid. Confused. Just curious. You're surrounded by shelves. Towering, dust-covered, scroll-stuffed shelves. Welcome to the midnight scriptorium, a cramped chamber beneath the flickering orange light of oil lamps, where scholars huddle over scrolls like moths circling the same eternal flame of confusion. You've barely stepped inside and already bumped into a pile of astronomy diagrams that collapsed like a papyrus avalanche. Your astronomer waves you forward. Don't touch anything you can't pronounce. You immediately touch nothing. This place isn't a library in the usual sense. It's less organized, more secretive, more alive. Scrolls whisper when you pass. Wax tablets stick together with questionable residue. Ink pots balance dangerously on cracked stone counters, and somewhere in the shadows, a cat watches you with the judgment of a librarian who's seen too much. This is where the real work happens, your astronomer says proudly. We debate, copy, correct. Sometimes sleep. You whisper, "Do you live here?" He doesn't answer. You're introduced to the copyist, a thin man with trembling hands, inky fingers, and the haunting stare of someone who's just misspelled the ecliptics for the third time. He nods once and returns to his task, tracing a star chart so slowly you wonder if time itself is afraid to rush him. Historians still argue whether these ancient scriptoriums served purely as preservation hubs or informal research collectives. From the looks of it, this one is both. The walls are lined with drafts, corrections, conflicting annotations, and at least one scroll titled "Maybe Venus is just being difficult." You pass a table where two women are cross-checking eclipse predictions and reading aloud from a Babylonian tablet, the other frowning deeply at a Greek translation that may or may not have invented an entirely new planet. Your astronomer stops before a shelf marked with a faded symbol of a crescent moon and an owl. This is the lunar section. It's also where I lose most of my confidence. He pulls out a worn scroll and unrolls it with a reverent sigh. I wrote this 5 years ago. Full lunar cycle predictions, accurate within 2 days. You nod. That sounds good. It's not, he whispers. It's shamefully average. Still, he reads it silently, fingers tracing the careful loops of ink. Then, in the margin, he adds, maybe consider tides, quirky fact of the night. Greek scholars were aware of lunar influence on tides, but the exact mechanics eluded them. Some attributed it to the moon's moist breath. Others just blamed Poseidon. To be fair, Poseidon got blamed for a lot. Elsewhere in the scriptorium, someone knocks over an oil lamp. A frantic shuffle follows. Nothing catches fire this time. You duck as a scroll is thrown across the room with the shout, "That's not precession. That's just bad drawing." Your astronomer chuckles. Dear review. Ancient style. You ask how often they update the scrolls. Constantly. The stars change. Wealthy dunt. But we do. He shows you a cabinet of outdated theories. Flat Earth, he says, pulling one out. Used to be popular. Then came shadows. Spheres everywhere now. Another scroll is titled "Why Mars Should Be Simple It Isn't." A third simply reads "Far was wrong about the moon," a memoir. You realize something. This room isn't just about preservation, it's about revision. The Greeks didn't just write things down and leave them. They argued with themselves. They revisited, recalculated, rewrote. And sometimes, reluctantly, they admitted, "I might have guessed badly." A junior scribe offers you a fig. You take it. He then hands you a wax tablet and says, "Can you copy this?" You stare down at a mess of planetary arcs, scribbled angles, and a drawing of a goat with a question mark. I don't think I should. Good instinct, your astronomer says, copying errors multiply like rabbits. He points to a scroll labeled "Stars of the Southern Sky." We've never actually seen these. Just heard about them. You ask. Then why keep them? He shrugs. Because someone might. Someday. That, you think, is the heart of it. This dim, dusty room isn't glamorous. There are no temple rituals here, no rooftop debates, no flashy scrolls soaked in metaphors, just tired eyes, stubborn hands, and a deep belief that recording matters. Even if it's wrong. Even if it's incomplete. Even if it's overwritten 5 years later by someone named Nicandros who can't draw Saturn correctly but keeps trying anyway. You help your astronomer carry a pile of revised charts to the recheck shelf. You pass a girl muttering planetary retrogrades under her breath, like a lullaby. You hear someone snoring behind the sun motion diagrams. You find the cat again. It's now sitting on your abandoned sandal. Eventually, you step outside into the night air. The stars haven't changed. But you have. Because now you understand what keeps these people awake. Not just curiosity, but the quiet, persistent hope that someone, someday, will read their scribbles and see further. You're sitting in the shadows of a courtyard, half covered in grape stems, listening to the quiet scratching of stylus on wax. The scriptorium is still buzzing behind you, but tonight your astronomer friend has brought you to meet someone who doesn't usually get invited to rooftop debates or moon-chasing adventures. Her name is Thalia. She looks up, briefly, as you approach. Then back, down to her tablet. The moonlight catches the soft curve of her brow, the tight bun of her hair, and the steady flick of her wrist as she marks another lunar notch into a half-finished calendar. She is not wearing the flowing robes of an academic. Just a simple tunic, dusty at the hem, with the olive leaves caught in the stitching. She keeps records. Your friend whispers. Lunar cycles. Monthly signs. She knows the moon better than I do. You wave. She gives the faintest nod. Then returns to her task. The wax tablet before her is neat, absurdly neat. Each row is a phase. Each mark a passing night. You notice she's even tracking cloud cover and owl calls. You whisper to your astronomer, "Why isn't she in the circle?" He sighs. "She's a woman." Right. Ancient Greece. Historians still argue how many women participated in early science, or whether their contributions were systematically erased, hidden, or absorbed into male authorship. The truth is, some did contribute. Quietly. Through calendars, ritual timing, agricultural records, anything practical enough to seem harmless. Thalia flips to a second tablet, this one covered in looping, cursive scrawl. It's not Greek. It's local dialect. Maybe even coded. She notices your curiosity. For privacy, she says quietly, in case someone accidentally borrows my notes. Your astronomer shifts uncomfortably. She doesn't trust the circle anymore, he says. They used one of her predictions. Didn't cite her. She doesn't react. Just keeps writing. You sit beside her, careful not to bump the tablet. She finally speaks. I watched the moon for 3 years straight. Never missed a night. Not even when my son had a fever. Not even when the roof leaked. She's not boasting. Just stating fact. And? You ask. She glances up, eyes calm and wide. It always comes back. Always. You smile. That's comforting. She shrugs. It's useful. Quirky fact of the night. Many ancient Greek women, especially in rural areas, maintained detailed lunar calendars to track fertility, harvest cycles, and ritual days. These calendars were often oral or written in domestic spaces, never formally acknowledged but deeply accurate. Your astronomer crouches near her and offers a small olive wood stylus. They're reviewing the solstice logs next week. He says gently, "They should hear from you." She stares at the stylus, doesn't take it. In not asking anymore, she replies. Instead, she opens a small bundle at her side, ear folded cloth revealing 3 more tablets, all covered in careful etchings. One shows lunar parallax. Another marks when stars disappear behind the moon. The third, a rough estimate of eclipse patterns 5 years into the future. You're stunned. This is more than record keeping. It's forecasting. She charts eclipses by hand. Your astronomer whispers. No bronze tools. No fancy theories. Just moonlight and memory. You ask Thalia, why keep doing it if no one listens? She doesn't look at you. Just presses her stylus gently into the wax. Because the sky's watching me back. You both sit in silence after that. Somewhere behind you, a chorus of tired scribes is singing softly, probably to stay awake. Someone drops a scroll. The cat knocks over an inkpot. A sleepy scholar calls out, "Who took my Mars notes?" But here, in this quiet moonlit patch of courtyard, a woman tracks the stars with the kind of care most men only pretend to have. Historians still argue whether contributions like Thalia's can ever be fully recovered. Whether unnamed astronomers, record keepers, temple attendants, and daughters of scribes will ever receive their due. You hope so, because tonight you saw the sky through her eyes. Not as a battlefield of male egos and missing citations, but as a rhythm, a pulse, a promise. You glance up. The moon is waning now, soft at the edges. You wonder how many secrets it's holding in plain sight, waiting for someone like her to write them down. You're back where it began, eye on a hill. The same soft dirt. The same whispering grass. The same old stick, the gnomer now leaning slightly more to the left than you remember. The cicadas are quieter tonight. Or maybe you're just better at listening. Your astronomer friend is here too, older in the face, ink-stained fingers resting on a folded cloth that smells faintly of ash and beeswax. Around him, a few younger students kneel, watching as he opens a worn scroll. "This," he says, "is everything I've learned." He gestures to a brittle page of dots. Lines, loops, constellations, eclipse notes, shadow lengths, and tiny scribbles of doubt in the margins. Some of it is wrong, he adds with a smile. Most of it? Probably. One boy asks, then why write it down? Because it's mine, your friend replies. And someday it won't be. The boy nods, quietly takes the scroll. This is the end of an era. The old astronomers or astronomer are handing their instruments to the next generation. Not because they're done learning, but because the sky is too big for one lifetime. Behind you, the stone grooves carved into the hill are filling with weeds. The sacred pebbles from the equinox ceremony are scattered. The armillary sphere sits half-rusted in a basket. No one uses it anymore, but no one can bear to throw it away either. You ask him, does it feel like a loss? He shakes his head. No, it feels. Like orbit, the world moves on. New thinkers emerge. Rome will rise. Scrolls will burn. The stars will stay, but the names will change. The Venus will still gleam at dawn, but someone else will claim her. The sky will be mapped again and again, each version forgetting something, inventing something new. Historians still argue whether Greek astronomy was ever truly scientific, or just the poetry of clever men with too much time. But you've seen the oil lamps, the cold stone benches, the worn styluses, and the tired eyes. These weren't dreamers instead of scientists. They were both. Always both. Quirky fact of the night, when the Library of Alexandria burned multiple times, depending on whom you ask, it's believed that countless astronomical scrolls vanished forever, including moon charts, planetary logs, and maybe even early heliocentric theories. All gone in smoke. Like stardust never written. The fire didn't just take data. It took memories, methods, debates, doubts, but not all was lost. Some copies survived in fragments. Some ideas re-emerged centuries later in distant lands, dressed in new alphabets. Others were whispered down through apprentices, tucked into temple ledgers, hidden in the margins of cookbooks or remembered only by name: Hipparchus, Aristarchus, Hypatia. You watch as your astronomer gently places his last scroll in a sealed clay tube and passes it to the youngest scribe. "Shall copy it tonight," he says. "He'll probably edit it again tomorrow." You both laugh. Quietly. The moon rises, not quite full, but radiant. You lie on your back, grass tickling your neck, and feel the earth's gentle spin. The constellations you've learned now glide overhead, each one a friend: Orion, Scorpius. That one you still think looks more like a chicken than a hero. Your astronomer lies beside you, hands folded behind his head. "You think anyone will remember us?" he asks, not looking at you. You think for a moment. "No," you say softly, "but they'll remember what you looked at." He nods. "That's enough." You close your eyes, and the stars keep watching. "So, now let's just breathe." You're lying on that quiet hill again. The fire has gone out. The last inkpot has dried. The scrolls are packed, the instruments covered in cloth, and the voices of the scholars have faded into gentle silence. The sky above you is endless, but somehow no longer intimidating. You've walked through shadows and calculations, debates and dreams. You've traced planets with your fingers and held the moon in your gaze for just a little too long. The night air is still, cool against your skin. You feel your chest rise and fall. Just like the tides, a soft breeze rustles the tall grass, brushing against your ear like a lullaby sung in a language older than memory. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls out once, then goes quiet, its message delivered. The stars are still turning, but you don't need to follow them anymore. Not tonight. You've seen their rhythm. You've heard their silence. You've watched people devote lifetimes to their light. And now, as the gentle hum of sleep begins to settle over your mind, you can let go of all that motion, all that math, all that myth. Let it drift behind your eyes like a forgotten constellation. You're safe. You're still. You're exactly where you need to be. The heavens are above you, but they're not watching. They're resting too. Good night, traveler.